Welcome to We Talk Money. I'm your host, Robert Gignac, author of the international bestseller, Rich is a State of Mind. And my guest today is Doug Hoyes, co-founder of Hoyes Michalos and Associates, 26 locations in Ontario, 30 years in the business for Doug as a CA and licensed insolvency trustee, having helped more than 10,000 Canadians solve their debt problems. But the reason he's joining me as a guest today is to talk about his new book, Straight Talk on Your Money. Doug, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Robert. Thank you.
So, why did you write this book?
Well, I believe that most financial problems are preventable. So, like you said, I'm a licensed insolvency trustee. In Canada, the law is before you can file a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, you have to meet with a licensed insolvency trustee to assess your situation to make sure we're coming up with the right solution for you. So a few years ago, I started going back over my notes from all those meetings with more than 10,000 people, and I thought I knew what I would find as to what the causes of financial problems are. We're not disciplined, we spend too much money, we don't track our spending, that sort of thing. But as I looked at my notes, I realized a lot of people get into trouble thinking they're doing the right thing. They're following the conventional wisdom, doing what their parents, everybody else has told them to do, and yet it gets them into trouble. So I pulled out of my notes the 22 most common myths that I saw people following, and that's what became this book.
So in some ways, it's a case of many Canadians are acting like they know what they're doing when they really don't know what they're doing because they just haven't been taught the right thing.
Yeah, or they don't take a step back and think about it. So if your parents bought a house and they tell you should buy a house, then you think, well, I guess I should buy a house. Well, for a lot of people, that's perfectly good advice. But if you've got a temporary job, if you're going to be moving around a lot, maybe it's not good advice. So take a step back and think about it. That's what is the starting point of a lot of these myths, and I give practical advice in every single chapter as to how to actually overcome that problem.
Now, I think it's interesting that you chose to share this information in the form of a book, because there are a lot of books on personal finance. I know, I wrote one. So what makes your book different?
A lot of personal finance books talk about the how, how to make a budget, how to save money. My book is much more about the why. Why do we make the decisions that we do? What causes us to make them? So I think by looking at the why, it helps us understand why we're making the decisions we are, and therefore we can tweak what we're doing, make changes, and come up with better decisions.
So the average consumer struggling with the concept of personal finance and money, is it an education issue?
I think it's partially an education issue. I think more than anything, it's a thinking issue. And when I say thinking, I'm not saying, thinking in the terms of doing math. That's what we think thinking is, calculating amortization schedules and things like that. I think it's more that in your mind, when you're faced with a decision, you have to have two people in your mind arguing out the decision. Should I buy the house or not? Should I finance that car or not? Should I get a 5-year loan or an 8-year loan? Yes, there's some math involved. And yes, there's some education involved. But I think if we could think through a lot more of our decisions, even if only for a minute or two, we'd come up with a lot better results.
I know in the work that I do, I tell people all the time, personal finance isn't about math, it's about behavior. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And your behavior is modified when you're aware of what you're doing. Why am I making those decisions? And then you can modify your behavior.
I love the way that you've developed it in terms of 22 myths about personal finance, and that's what we're going to cover when we come back from this short break.
Let's face it, finding the right career for me is really tough. How can I know my own strengths and reflect my true self to potential employers? I want a career, not just a job.
How can I discover my true self?
That's the question every job seeker should be asking before they begin their search.
Welcome to Career Streams, the largest private career counseling company in southwestern Ontario.
Through our unique objective testing process, we coach you into discovering aptitudes and skills that reflect your true self.
We listen and guide you along the way so you can realize your true potential. With over 20 years of one-on-one career counseling experience, we're here to help.
Invest in yourself for a brighter future. Contact Career Streams Resources today. Take that first step towards career success.
Well done.
Welcome back to We Talk Money. My guest today is Doug Hoyes, author of Straight Talking Your Money, new book on personal finance. Just before the break, we were talking about the fact that there are 22 myths as it relates to personal finance. I've picked a couple at random. I'm going to toss them out to Doug. Here's the first. Financial experts often talk about budgeting as being the most important thing. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel good about that. I think budgeting, you're right, every financial book tells you got to make a budget, you got to make a budget. And what I've found with my clients is that a budget is something like going on a diet. I count calories for the first few days and I'm really psyched about it. I'm tracking my spending, but then I get a little, distracted with life. I get behind on it. Now all of a sudden it's not balancing and I've got a problem. So my advice is, rather than focusing on trying to keep a budget, focus on knowing where your money goes and set yourself up for success. In other words, cheat. So the way I would cheat is, if I've got a cable bill of $100 a month and I get paid every 2 weeks, I would go on the computer and automatically program it to send $50 every 2 weeks to the cable people on my payday.
Okay.
I don't need to track it on a budget, because as soon as my paycheck comes in, the debts are paid, the bills are paid. And you can do that with pretty much everything. I think that's much more reasonable and achievable for most people than a budget. That's why I'm not a big fan of budgeting, but I am a big fan of knowing where your money goes.
One of the myths that made me smile a great deal was entitled, "You're human, you're not rational." Tell us about that.
Exactly right. We think we're rational. And if I ask you, so why'd you buy that car you're driving? You would tell me all the rational reasons that you bought it. Well, it's got good gas mileage, good safety rating. Here's all the reasons that I researched, and that's why I bought it. And in my experience, no, that's after the fact rationalization. You bought it because it makes you feel good. You like the way your coworkers, when they see you pulling into the parking lot, say, boy, he's driving a pretty cool car. There's nothing wrong with that. But you should recognize that a lot of the decisions you make are emotional as opposed to rational. If you can separate that out in your mind, you're much more likely to make better decisions.
Okay. Myth, I think it's number 7 in the book, was make sure the expert you're talking to is an expert.
Yeah, everyone can say they're an expert. Everyone can say they're a finance person. Okay, what are your actual qualifications? How many people have you met with? How long have you been in this business? What qualifications do you actually have? Just because someone says they're an expert doesn't mean they're actually an expert. Having a blog does not automatically make you an expert. It may, but it may not. So do a bit of research before blindly following along with what the current fad of the day is, and you're more likely to make better decisions.
Now, if our viewers are interested in learning more about the other 19 myths, where can they pick up a copy of Straight Talk About Your Money?
It's available at fine bookstores everywhere, online, Amazon, Chapters, Indigo. There's a Kindle version, Kobo version, Audible version. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Doug, thank you very much for being my guest today and taking time out of your busy schedule to share that insight with our viewers.
Great to be with you, Robert. Thank you.
And that's a wrap of another episode of We Talk Money. Thanks to my guest today, Doug Hoyes, and to you, the viewer at home, thank you for watching.